Welcome, 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 and thanks for listening. Tonight we're honoring the legacy of our guest Katherine Woodward Thomas, who passed away on April 27, 2026, which was shortly after we recorded this. And I think the fact that she did go through with this recording really speaks to her commitment to her message, and we are happy to do what we can to spread her wonderful message and her new book, which was just released in January. I think it might make sense for me to share what the family and team of Katherine shared recently. I'll just read this. It is with deep sadness that we share that Katherine Woodward Thomas passed away on April 27, 2026 from complications of ovarian cancer, surrounded by her loved ones. Katherine touched so many lives through her work, her writing, and the way she showed up, with honesty, compassion, and a deep belief in what is possible for each of us. Through Calling in the One, Conscious Uncoupling, and What's True About You, as an aside, those are her 3 books, and What's True About You was the subject of this podcast. She supported hundreds of thousands of people around the world in returning to their true selves and creating a future rooted in truth, possibility, and love. She cared deeply about this community and was devoted to seeing and supporting the goodness and potential in each person and who they were becoming. Her legacy lives on in the lives she touched and in the love, growth, and truth she inspired. And I will include links to this page because there's a note also that they would love to hear from you if you have any memories of Katherine. And without further ado, I'm also honored that Professor Lynn Pardee really took the laboring oar on this podcast, and I think really connected with Katherine, and I'm grateful that they included me along the ride.
I'll just say, to get us started, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much.
And I think maybe a good place to start would be to ask you to talk a little bit about what's true about you in the context of transformational psychology. There may be some of the listeners who really don't know what that form of psychology is. Could you speak to that a little bit and how your writing fits into that?
Thank you, Professor Lynn. I love to make the distinction between healing the past and transforming our lives. And transformational psychology is really focused on the latter, with the understanding that, yes, we have to go back and connect the dots, get ourselves unfrozen, understand the impact on our lives, the imprinting, all of those things that we're doing when we're looking back at the past and we're finally facing things maybe we never had the opportunity to do, and to heal in the presence of a really skillful practitioner. But I like to say that work of healing the past can really save your life, but it doesn't necessarily change the underlying patterns and the patterns of personality now that you've developed. And also, it doesn't actually begin to fill in the blanks of what I call missing development that would allow something else to happen. Let me give you a very simple example. So taking that out of theory, if one grows up with a profound level of neglect, let's say, they will very likely land on a sense of themselves as being very alone in this world. And they will project onto others from that center that others always either leave or are never really there for them to begin with. So one of the things that they will avoid then is conflict, because in that consciousness, there's an anxiety. It's actually the underlying consciousness of codependence. There's an underlying anxiety that someone's going to leave you. And that leaving might be physical leaving, but it could actually just be even disapproval. It could be that, you're somehow on opposite sides of the fence here now. And that might be intolerable to someone who's really suffering. with this kind of almost panic response. Someone's going to leave. So the missing development there is conflict resolution, being able to have a good fight, being able, at which we know differentiates people and actually is what really bonds people together in a healthier way. I understand who Lynn is. Lynn understands who Katherine is, and we choose to go deeper with each other. So if you're handicapped by missing development, no matter how much you understand what your mother did, what your father did, why they did it, forgiving them, trying to, do all the healing work you can to get rid of the fact that none of your relationships are really working. They're very one-sided. You're the giver, the other person is the receiver. Or, at the end of the day, you just don't really get invited into the party. Somehow you always have to generate your participation. So it's a very painful pattern to have around the I'm alone, where you're not included. Another way of being is that you never really learn inside the assumption that other people are never going to be there for you. You're never really vulnerable with people, because why would you be? And if you're not vulnerable with people, people can't find their way into your world. So one of the big things about transformational psychology is we're looking to see how you're the source of your experience of this ongoing pattern. And we begin to identify the missing development that you'll now need to grow in order to leave that whole thing behind. And I know that a lot of us have been doing our work for years in the trenches, really digging up the dirt from the past. We've done great work, but we want to move on. We want to have good relationships. At some point you say, do I get to graduate from this? I don't want to keep telling this story. That's not my story. I love Joe Dispenza says, tell me the story of your future, not your past. Right? So it's where our focus is, because where our focus goes is where we grow. And if we're continually looking backwards, ad nauseum, at some point, we're just overly identified with the self of that story. I'm working at the level of identity shift. How do we shift into the identity of who we're called to become, which studies show is just as significant in our life journey as the past? There was a study done in 1986, Paula Nurius and Hazel Marcus, who's up at Stanford, who just won a wonderful award. Hazel has done amazing work on identity. And back in 86, they wrote an article called Possible Selves. And what they asserted is that the self of the future influences our motivation, our choices, our actions today, just as much or more so as the past. And somehow we've been leaving this part out of the conversation. And millions of us are kind of just, what happened when I was 5? What happened when I was 7? It's yes and. It's not one is better, but we need to include both. And so one of the messages I'm grateful to be able to put out in this book is how we start to go into the future, because you want to activate the growth that would be necessary to live that positive possible future. So step 1 of the 7-step process is claim a positive possible future.
Yes, one of the things that I thought was so powerful in your book is that you've been so forthcoming and willing to provide examples from your own life and how one can do that. And I thought that was a very courageous thing to do. You find that throughout the book, that you've been willing to share with your readers how that would manifest, how it manifested itself in your life. And I thought that was an incredible strength of the book, that you've been willing to do that.
Well, I know that we all need stories. We really need to share at that level, honestly, with each other. We're talking about consciousness. We're talking about where we put our attention. All of these very important conversations. And unless you have a story that you can relate to and say, oh, yeah, oh, okay, I get it now. I think it just stays in your mind like a theory. And I'm all about what's going to give us freedom. Those of us who had a difficult road growing up, which is, quite a few of us, we really we really need to find ways to not be held captive by the mistakes and misdeeds of others who maybe aren't even in our lives anymore. Who knows? But so I'm looking for freedom. And I think it's a continuation of the conversation that Joseph Campbell started with the hero's journey, which Jung talked about a lot. Like, we're going somewhere. And our task, I think, Lynn, is to turn pain into purpose. And actually, Maslow, I keep talking about this, I'm so thrilled to discover this. Maslow, with his hierarchy of needs, at the time, he said self-actualization was the kind of the tip of the iceberg there. Well, not the iceberg, maybe that's not a good metaphor, but it was, what we're aspiring to. But before he died, he actually was rethinking that. And he felt grieved. He wrote in his journals a lot, and he felt really grieved that he had popularized his theory before it was ready, because what he felt at the end of his life is self-transcendence, which is when you find a way to use your pain to bless the world. Self-transcendence was actually where we needed to go. And unfortunately, he died of a heart attack before he could popularize that or really write about that or flesh that out. So I do feel it my personal mission now to kind of, continue on his work, because we're just all building off each other.
Yes, you segued beautifully into where I was headed with my next question, and that is that in moving forward in a kind of transformational view, there comes a time when you transition from looking backward into a kind of space of clearing psychologically and emotionally that will then allow you to sort of embark on this very forward-facing part of the journey. And as I recall in your book, that allows then for thinking about spirituality in new ways, really asking oneself some new questions about what one may have learned in the past. And you've been very open to different perspectives on spirituality. And I noticed it seemed to me was a very conscious decision on your part, that you were legitimately bringing in positive work from different religious perspectives.
Yes. Well, there is a spiritual dimension we're really crossing into. I hear Dick Schwartz is really moving in that direction too, because we're talking about which self are we identified with. And so where we want to be navigating life from is from the self that's holding a larger perspective on our lives, has the capacity for wisdom, that can think with, a tremendous amount of resources, like all the development that we have, I think we're all kind of savants in some way, because all of us are so highly developed and so competent. And at the same time, we have these blind spots. And the blind spots are when we kind of collapse into the younger self, which happens like a breath. It happens very easily, very habitually. Somebody doesn't call you back in time. You get a no answer when you were hoping for a yes. Even the anticipation, you've had bad dating experiences. Now you have a date tonight. So suddenly, the anticipation of rejection. So any of these disappointments, obstacles, setbacks, delays can just throw us into what I call a false center. And we can start navigating from that part of ourselves very easily. The thing about that is that when I'm centered, and we'll go back to the I'm alone too, although there's 22 that I've identified as the most primary. Most common, I'm not safe, I'm not good enough, I'm damaged goods, I'm bad, I'm not wanted, I'm too much, so they're all listed there. And they all have particular ways of relating that create feedback relationally from others. And that's what actually solidifies the self. Okay, that's it. And Dan Siegel is doing really good work around this. He's got the from me to we, or got a wonderful book. I have to look it up because I keep stumbling over the name of the book. But he's doing this research, and he's the one who's asserting and really demonstrating that beliefs are relational. And I don't think we've talked about that enough. We talk about, oh, I have this belief I'm not safe, and so but what's the relational component to that? Well, the relational component is others are going to hurt me. Others want something. They're going to take from me. They're going to take advantage of me in some way. So then you're coming into the conversation defended, which then brings out the worst in another person. And they behave that because they can feel like you don't trust them. So now they don't trust you and they get guarded. So you're kind of, we're covertly creating our own experience in a way. It feels like it's just happening to us. Then we get mad and victimized by our own imprinting. Why is this showing up again? I'm dating my father again, But it's actually showing up because of who you are being in the moment. So, I have a cognitive background as a therapist, but I'm really in the realm of ontology now. We're in the realm of who are you being? It's not so much about what are you doing, who are you being? And how is that impacting others? And how is that then reinforcing the story that you're centered in? I think I lost the thread of your original question, though. I don't know.
Oh, you were just fine.
Okay.
You gave us some wonderful clarifying information in there that I would not have gone down that path. So I appreciate the sophistication that you're discussing there, is how that, in terms of how that evolves. And how easily it is then for our relationships to be impacted by that miscommunication, that misunderstanding right from the outset. I think we had, as I recall, we were headed in the direction of talking too about spirituality. But
right, self with a capital S. Okay.
Yes, and as you describe it, this process that you're describing right now, the experiences with spirituality, with religion that we've had growing up, those are going to shape our expectations and our perceptions as well. And so this is where we get into, I guess, the true definition of transformation. You've identified key dynamics that if they go unaddressed, really there's no part of one's life that's not going to be impacted by it. Mm-hmm. So, but thinking about the spiritual aspects of it, I noticed that you bring in elements of mindfulness and different Christian approaches. And even in your personal story, you shared about the belief systems that you had grown up with, and then how that transformed. It's what I think of as one of the more beautiful things about this book, that you, and there are very many, but it's one of the very core things where you really are showing that clearing. Once one starts on this path, that lots of different ways of thinking about one's relationship to spirituality, to God, or however one conceptualizes it becomes possible at that point, because you've reached that clearing where now you get to decide, are you going to engage in this new challenge of looking forward? So I welcome anything you have to say about that.
Yeah, thank you. I was very fortunate in my younger adulthood to actually have to go to a 12-step program for an eating disorder, because I was there for 12 years, and it gave me the discipline of recognizing that there's a force and field of life that's greater than me, and to surrender into a larger story. Because I tend to be a very willful person, which is a neutral trait. Actually, it can be great and can be harmful. But that really taught me humility, I think. And I also learned from the 12-step program how to look at myself as the source of my experience and how to be self-responsible. I think one thing I want to say to people is that when I'm talking about non-victimization, I'm not suggesting that you are victimized. Very important to know that. And that victimization needs to be witnessed and grieved and faced and validated. But then, in order to change that particular pattern where you've been really most impacted by that experience or that, prolonged developmental experience that was missing, you have to take responsibility for, as an adult, how you're showing up and the choices that you're making and the actions you're taking. If I asked most people, why are you this way? Why do you keep dating abusive people, for example? They're going to tell me that their father was an abuser, or their mother was an abuser, or their older sibling, or, they're going to give me an explanation from the past. And that's very interesting. It's probably very true. It deserves to be addressed very deeply in a very heartfelt way, in a tender way. But it's not going to give you the power to actually change that pattern. What you need to see is that there's missing development now. That somehow, growing up in that home, you created what I call pseudo-safety strategies. I think as a profession, we're a little too lenient on those because we kind of stop at, that was so clever of me to make that up when I was 8 years old. I'm so proud of myself. Because those ways of relating are choking the life out of you now. That's why you can't excel. That's why you can't have good relationships. Keep sabotaging your life in very meaningful and, dangerous ways. So we have to take these ways of relating very seriously. If I grew up with a narcissist and I learned how to get on by being invisible and putting my first attention on the other person, I'm going to be with narcissists for the rest of my days until I learn that I need to presence myself and it's my responsibility. And that's going to mean that I need to presence myself with myself. I need to know what I am feeling in any given moment. I need to know what I need. I need to know if that's an appropriate need or an unhealthy need. And I need to be able to then express that to others. So that's what I'm calling missing development. We all are doing, such good work, and I'd rather see us start to invest in who we're called to become than in, untangling the gnarly knot ad nauseum. So that's the difference between healing and transformation. I think some of the wounds that we have, they're never going to really go away fully. I mean, if you lost a parent or, something tragic happens in your life, you were the victim of a fire and you have, body parts that no longer work or, all the sorts of things we live through. And there will come a time, where you just sit and need to cry. And then we get up and we move on and we do the best we can. So some healing will always be taking place, like a deep witnessing and a compassion on ourselves. And then we move on to see how might we bless other people because we understand the pain of the loss that we ourselves have suffered. That's what gives life its rich meaning. And frankly, that's where joy is. That's where the joy is.
Yeah. Yes. And there's so much, you have this beautiful, comprehensive conceptualization of this process. And I can't imagine what it takes then to bring that into the specific guidelines that you provide in your book. You have a very well-defined, I think, a very well-defined process that one can undertake then to move in that direction of forward thinking. You have a lot of tools and you've organized it in such a way that I'm sure one could engage in that process with a therapist who was open to that approach. But you've also said this can be self-empowerment. You can get together with a group of like-minded people who similarly want to engage in that. And then you've gone about the work of putting together all of those tools and guidelines. I found that remarkable.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I it's almost a blend between therapy and coaching. Because typically we've had is, dealing with the past, coaching, dealing with the future. And there's coaching is a great profession. And for those of us who really suffered trauma, it's not necessarily just, easy to start to change our behavior. So a lot of coaching is on a behavioral level. And so to be able to go back and connect with the self and the body that gets activated, and to be able to mentor that self from the wise self to the wounded self. And I sometimes call it the wise self or the wounded self or the true self versus the traumatized self. Most people, when they drop down and kind of collapse into I'm not good enough story, they are overly identified with that story because there's so much emotion to it. That's what beliefs are, really. It's a cluster of emotions. And so to be able to say, sweetheart, how old are you? How old are you? And what are you assuming is true about you? And from there, what are you assuming is true about others and about life? I'm not good enough. Others are better than me. I have to work twice as hard for half the reward. That might be that matrix. So I look holistically at the beliefs. And then we differentiate it. It's a younger self, and it's active now. So it's a very subjective kind of science, very subjective experience. So it's very simple. It's like, what's actually happening in my body right now? And then I might say, well, what's really true about that, honey? What's really true? Let me tell you, I'm going to be your fairy godparent for a moment. I'm going to just speak words of wisdom to you. That was, you were too young to understand, but your father needed to go to AA. Your parents were going through something. It had nothing to do with you, darling. Let me tell you about you and how wonderful you are. And you befriend that part of yourself. So this gets into, really admiring Kristen Neff's work about self-compassion. So, right. So she talks about compassion on the self being not just liking certain traits about yourself, being able to list the things you like, but it's the actual relationship that you have with yourself. So to be able to kind of master consciousness in that way is actually not that difficult, but we do need a process. I decided I'm knee deep in creating a new form of therapy, and actually we're just starting this month with our first cohort called Future Forward Therapy, because I think this is where we're going as a profession. I like to say, could the future of mental health be the future? Right?
That is wonderful. And as you were describing, sort of giving the exemplar of what you would say and do, I thought to myself, there needs to be really solid training programs for therapists as well. And how do you use this information? How do you use this wisdom integrated into your practice? Yes, that would be wonderful.
That, because it's been my instinct, and we're actually on the court putting that together right now. And we're just starting our first level 1 cohort because I've got it now in 3 levels of training. So thank you for that encouragement.
Oh my goodness, that I had no idea, but that is perfect, because as I read through the book, I thought, there will be people who are hungry for this, who will pick this up, but they need some support, and even in a relatively healthy group of friends, it would still be difficult for them.
Absolutely.
And so having therapists who are really well grounded in this approach would just be amazing. Yeah, it would just be amazing.
Yeah, so I'm creating this training for the therapist, and I'm also creating for lay people and or coaches. So we have True You coaches, and I actually have people who are already certified in that, because we've been working for a couple of years to build this up. And so I think I have maybe a dozen True You coaches, and maybe I think 6 to 8 future forward therapists. And we're really ready to roll it out and start to test it with people and get everything on board. So thanks for letting me share that. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that is exciting. Well, thank you for sharing it with us. And Mike, I'm co-opting the conversation here. My
No,
apologies to you. So
no,
please
no,
jump
no.
right in.
No, not at all, not at all. I'm listening to this future forward therapy, FFT. The after, but the part that I'm really interested in is the first step of the process. You talk about setting a radically unreasonable intention, and I
Yeah.
sort of like that, and I just wanted to sort of if you could maybe unpack that a little bit about the radically unreasonable intention, or RUI with FFT.
Yeah, great. Well, so how I define this, so I see goals and intentions as very, very different. I see a goal as a very positive thing, but it's kind of the best case scenario predictable outcome given your current resources and what's predictable. The radically unreasonable intention is completely outside of your identity to have, and you have no evidence for it that could actually possibly happen. Because that's actually the desire of people's hearts. That's the hunger. People feel like they're living like some kind of, they're stuck in a parallel life. Like they thought maybe they'd have this by now, they'd have more success, they'd have more recognition, they'd have the partner that they always wanted, they would have the family. Like people are confused. So then they're trotting back and doing more work on the past to try and unblock that. But I say, let's just go for the gold. And let's just say, you've never had a good relationship. Your mom was a narcissist, your dad borderline. You were an only child kind of captured in that home. So you have a deep I'm alone. And, it's all, you're sorting. And let's just start with the future. I am a happily married woman to a man who is capable of fully meeting me and loving me. And that happens, and I'm engaged to that person within 1 year's time, right? You can start there. Because what you do when you really get outrageous, first of all, whenever I sponsor that as the therapist, and I sponsor that in some way, because I'm in the power position, truthfully, and I'm educated and I know a lot, they trust me. And the fact that I believe them when they say that is enough to have them burst into tears. Like I've never had the courage to actually say that out loud. Very moving. So one of the roles of the therapist is to sponsor the potentials of people that they haven't even dared articulate. What happens when we have the courage to claim a future that's that outrageous is it activates what Dwayne Dyer called a future pull. It activates the full the growth, and the goal is not that you are wanting to manifest that. You run out right now and go find that person. The goal is to become who you would need to be in order to manifest and sustain that relationship. So it's like now you're in a marathon of stripping yourself of your defenses, looking at your habitual ways of relating, getting into beginner territory. There's a whole chapter on Carol Dweck's work with mindset where she's talking about a fluid self and that can grow, that can take feedback because it's not shame-based, right? All the false centers are shame-based, and shame stunts development right away. So what we're looking for when we set a radically unreasonable intention is an intention that's literally outside of your sense of self to have. Because that's the reason why we've not been able to manifest that future. Because one of the principles of the book also is that wherever we're centered at the level of identity is where we're generating our lives from. So if you're centered in, and you know that from that Einstein, was it Einstein? Do you ever live in a friendly universe or a not friendly universe? So, you can tell across the room, somebody walks in the room, are they in a friendly universe or an unfriendly universe? They walk in open, ready to meet new people. They walk in suspicious, closed, stick to the wall, come in like tentatively. We wear our beliefs in the field around us. I like that Pigpen character from Peanuts, the Peanuts cartoon. It's like just his own little, and then Polly Young Eisendrath calls it your own little snow globe, like your own little point of view, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're really looking at. And so step one is that's where we start, because it does focus us now on develop. And really the work is like, are we going to keep analyzing, or are we going to start developing conscious growth? But you have to do it in a way where you really identify the specific missing skills and capacities. And so that's the value of having broken down all of the 22 false centers, because I write a list of the ways you've been covertly creating it, and also a list of the new ways of relating, and then how you're going to need to grow in order to sustain, that trajectory.
Yes. 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 I was, now that we've gotten Mike into the conversation, I was also wondering, of course, and I'm dating myself now. So in the past, it was you were much more likely to see women coming to therapy than you were to see men coming to therapy. And I wonder, in your experience, has that evolved? Do you see, I could see this work being equally applicable to men and women. But I'm wondering if you have seen that in your practice, if the therapists that you work with have seen an increase. And Mike, I'd love to know your perspective on to what extent this work resonates with you. So I'll toss that out there.
Great question. Mike, I'll let you go first. Love to listen.
Okay.
Oh, nice, Katherine. That was beautiful.
Well, thank you. Well, I can't. So I think a lot of it, I'm listening to you all explain these things so eloquently, and it's almost like I have this thing, like I'll just tell you what happened last night at 3 a.m. I always have like 3 a.m. things where like the rubber really hits the road. I wake up in the middle of the night and it's a body thing though. It's not with words and it's just like an energy that I feel like is passing through me. So my practice is not trying to verbalize it, although sometimes there is sort of like a helper coming in and saying, well, just soothe yourself, or you can, some sort of reassurance. But it's more just trying to, it's not like it's such a visceral thing that it's not about an idea or a concept. It's rather finding a way to let it sort of run its course in a way that's just like comforting. It's like all I want to do is just to be like held or something. It's not something I'm trying to figure out, and figuring out kind of puts me away from it. It's more just, and so I don't know if this is answering or if that is going on, but it's not, to me, it's just like it's like there's this sort of solid sort of energy within me that I'm trying to circle around and let it kind of come out more.
Wow.
And it's not, but so that's my thought. It's like this thing of like trying to go back and tell a story and stuff. And yeah, I've got, I'm sure I'm telling a story, but the story is just to be with it and try to comfort it and endure it and actually feel it, as opposed to creating something that's on the outside of it. It's just to feel it. And that's like the hardest point, to just feel it and stay with it.
I really appreciate your attempts to just really communicate what's actually happening with you. Thank you. Just let us into your world in that way. I think it's beautiful. So I think things are waking up for men. And I do see the men take this class. I'm known for relationships. That's the background historically with calling in the one and conscious uncoupling. And it is normally women in my classes, 97%. But when I do a True You Awakening course, maybe it goes to a 75-25, which is wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big difference. The men love this work. The men love this work. First of all, it kind of, I think, appeals to the pioneering sense, like, oh, we're going somewhere. We have territory to now, claim new territory. And I think it's very practical as well. And it's very grounded and gives them tools that they use. And I find that men, they like the tools. Like, I guess we all like the tools, but the men really resonate with the tools. And the men are about purpose now. I think there's a big crisis, certainly with the young men, not finding their purpose. And True You is all about purpose, like what you really came here for. Because the whole True You trajectory is, let's get you out of reaction and into creativity, into being generative of the future that you desire. So it's into, the recognition that we do actually indeed impact the future by what we take a stand for and what we commit ourselves to. And we can perform miracles there. And frankly, it's one of the reasons that I was so motivated to create the book, was because of what's happening in our world, where, all of these kind of greedy, crazy people who are in charge right now are stealing our future. And the resignation that's coming up, the sense of powerlessness or insignificance, like, well, what can I do to stop this? So it's the technology of how to stand for something that looks like it's never going to happen, and then start to cause that future with everything you have. So you have to be able to, know how to work with that younger self, because it's not like we're going to become perfect people who never get triggered now, or who never, get discouraged. So we have to work with ourselves so that where we act from is actually from the strongest parts of ourselves, the wisest parts of ourselves, and to be able to create a future together for our world and stand strong that. So we have to do it first for ourselves. We have to learn the technology, but it's really inside of this larger assumption that all of us have a role to play in the transformation of our world.
Yes. And it makes some sense to me that, and please feel free to absolutely disagree with me, but I feel like our culture has shifted in recent decades, that some of the more rigid gender roles have been loosened. And yet there are still ways in which we don't encourage men to, and Mike, you can feel free to disagree with me too. I was including you in that. But where men aren't encouraged really to spend a lot of time with their emotions, it's more get the job done, focus on where you're moving next. And I think that's changed. I think perhaps as we've had an evolution of spiritual approaches, that suddenly, there are at least dimensions of our experience where it's okay for men to talk a bit more about how their feelings relate to their development. But I think there are still real differences in that, just as there are some still some constraints, significant constraints for women in the way that those gender roles have been differentiated. I think it's much better than it was certainly 50 years ago. But I think perhaps there are still some of those constraints, but please feel free to disagree with me if that's not your sense.
No, I think I'm with you. These are really important things for us to be talking about. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
And it's almost like the difference in when you two are discussing things, because the eloquence is very soothing. And then when I kind of talk about it, it's more sort of jarring. I don't have like the sort of the soothing aspect of it. I could be wrong, but it was just the sense that the way you talk about, your feelings and emotions, it's like a music, and it's like, it's flowing and it's kind of soothing, and then yet, but then when you talk about men, it's like it's more abrupt and it's not as, it's harsher. It's harsher around the edges. It's not as flowing, perhaps.
And just to pursue that for a second, did it feel like that was harsher on my part, or that
No, my
description of the
description.
culture? Oh, your description.
No, my
Oh,
description. Like, no, because when you two were talking and talking back and forth, it was flowing and it just was very soothing, because you were talking about your emotions and you were comforting each other and talking about this and that, and it just flowed and it was very soothing. And then, and then when you talk about men, when I started talking, it's this and this and this, it's kind of more of a this and that, and it's not sort of the music around it as much. I don't know if that's a. So I was
I did.
separating myself from you two. I mean, I've told you this before, Lynn, that you're very
Yes,
sort of you're very comforting when you talk. It's like you create space for people and everything. So
She does. She does. I just met Lynn, and I can concur with that.
No, I think what strikes me about you, Mike, is that you are so open to talking about your feelings, and and I've noticed this in other ways about you. So it's not just, but you're very conscientious in how you describe things. You really try to stay true to that. And I don't think that that's common as you might think it is for many men. At least, and let's just say the men, some of the men that that are more part of my world. But it's not that I think they don't have those feelings or share some of those same challenges in life that women do. But I do think that we're still suffering from some of the prohibitions of the decades of the past. But Katherine, please jump in, save me.
I appreciate Mike's authenticity too. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that you used the expression "dating yourself," and that has two meanings. And I hadn't thought of that before. Like literally, like the meaning of like going back in time, with the meaning of
Yes.
actually going on a date with yourself in the present. It was interesting that you said. I just thought it was that's an interesting phrase, dating yourself, as it in the sense of meaning that it's an old thing, but it's also can mean an intimacy with yourself too. I'm sure there's some sort of
That's
interesting
interesting.
Yeah, well, it's an
Yeah,
interesting that's
that's
the same.
interesting.
It's an interesting that it's the same expression, and what that would mean. That, like going back in the conversation we've been having about forward thinking versus reverse thinking. Dating yourself could
Yes.
be reversed, or maybe the word probably is reverse is not the word I should use, but the going back to try to figure out yourself and your trauma versus forward thinking. So dating
Yes.
yourself would be going back and retroactively examining the cause, which isn't, I understand your focus, Katherine. So, or
Well, it has been with calling in the one. So she wants
yeah,
to date herself. People do that for a time. I think it's called self-partnering. People attribute it to an actress, but it was actually created by Melanie Tonia Evans, who is an expert in narcissism. And one of her processes, she calls it that, and she's quite a brilliant soul. So yeah, to bond with yourself, to befriend yourself, that's going to be truthfully the core. And also Margaret Paul with her inner bonding work. This is the core of transforming your life. You've got to have that relationship with yourself. So step 2 is name your source fracture story. And that source fracture story is interchangeable with false center, except it's a bit more specific. And that's the original wounding in your heart. And it's very important to name that part and to build a relationship with that part. So I love James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, and I'm certainly not the only one. I've never seen so many Amazon reviews on one book. He is amazing. I mean, he is an amazing teacher. Sometimes people get the right last name, Clear, James Clear. So Atomic Habits is a great book. And in it, he says you cannot change your life unless your identity is aligned with the having of what you want to create. And then out of a 300 and something page book, he devotes probably about 6 pages to a transformation of identity. I'm wrong with those figures, but you get the point. And this is why I said, well, I need to go and write this, because we all want a transformation of identity. But if you spent 18 years in a home where you were devalued and made to feel like Cinderella, I'm worthless. It's not as easy as just saying, I am worthy of the future I desire. You have to go back and really mentor that part of you and learn how to hold and contain your own inner experience from a deeper center. And you're right, and I did create very simple, elegant practices. So for that one, I'll give this to everyone right now. If you find yourself triggered, first of all, don't act when you're triggered, which is exactly opposite of what you want to do. You want to fix what just happened. Somebody, you feel humiliated by something. Now you need to explain yourself because, you feel embarrassed or whatever. What you do instead is you press the pause button. You excuse yourself to go to the restroom and you just sit with yourself for a moment. And I would say, I would close my eyes and say, Katherine, honey, what are you feeling right now? And I would isolate a feeling, one feeling. Oh, I can see that you feel really humiliated. Ouch. Okay, I got it, sweetheart. What else are you feeling? I feel so embarrassed. Okay, I can see that you feel embarrassed. And what else? You do that until you're kind of clear. And then you say, what do you need, Angel? So you're speaking to yourself in the third person. Studies have recently come out that show that when we speak to ourselves in the third person, much easier to regulate ourselves. So you regulate yourself so that you're back in your wise self. And then you might say something like, you know what, this really is a tough one. And I'm going to go and deal with it. So you just go play in your room, sweetheart. Right? So you can say, what are you making this mean? I'm unworthy. How old are you? How big is the energy here? Okay, honey, go play in your room because I'm going to go now handle this and correct this. I know how to do this. And then you might go back out and say, look, I imagine you didn't mean to. You didn't say anything that would put me in an awkward position. But I did feel a little uncomfortable with our last exchange. Can we try again? Right. So then because you're in your adult and you're not in that reactive, oh, I'm just going to shrink myself self now and just try and get through the rest of this dinner. So that says everything about, is your life going to go this way or is it going to go this way? You have to learn how to work with that self. And then you can go and do your little atomic habit thing of, speaking up or, whatever that small changes that James Clear is encouraging us to make, and that which is very effective. But it is in the small time choice points. So I'm always looking for the choice points. I want to know, I don't really, the truth is I'm interested in my history. But I'm more upset because if I'm out of integrity with the future that's wanting to happen than I am because of something my mother said when I was 7. That's actually the truth. So how am I out of integrity? And what would I need to do to get back into integrity so that I have fidelity to the future? It gives me an anchor. I'm anchoring into that future self, into becoming that part of me. And, I love when teachings kind of arrive on the world because they kind of arrive collectively. So there's a lot of talk now about changing your personality. Well, what is your personality? Your personality are all the ways that you kind of compensated for the wounding or the things that the habits that you learned in your family. But it's changeable. We can change our personalities. We just have to be willing to change our personalities. And if you really look at what's at stake, for you and for your family and for your community and for our world, I think it's important to know that we are indeed fluid beings who are programmed for growth. and freedom. And it's all going to come down to choice points. So the last step is make new choices, take new actions. And it's about showing up in ways that feel foreign to you. So, for example, I tell this story in the beginning of the book where I am attending a church service, and I was very shy. So I always would kind of go late after services start, and I'd leave early because there were like thousands of members of this church, and I would just get really shy to meet new people. Well, when the church didn't book me for a book signing, in spite of the fact that I'd been attending services for so many years, I got my feathers kind of ruffled, and I was really hurt, and I felt like, how could you do that to me, And it kind of triggered my I don't belong fault center, my own source fracture story. Hang on one sec. I'm taking medication. My mouth gets really dry here. So I know, right? So I keep having to sip on water. So inside of that, what I did, instead of going back to analysis, why do I do this, which I had done ad nauseum, I decided to just be responsible for how am I the source of this? How did I show up? How did I not show up? And one of the things I saw was this habit of kind of hiding in the back row, going late, leaving early, not making eye contact with people, not giving people a chance to get to know me. So I decided to go back and go early and sit in the front row and raise my hand to participate in things. I have to tell you, it was like nails on a chalkboard. Showing up like that because it felt so foreign. Like, this isn't me. I'm being inauthentic. I don't know this version of myself. I felt so uncomfortable, like I was playing a part in a movie. But I stayed with it. Because the truth is that that's actually who I am. And what I learned about the I don't belong story is that the way to break that one up is, instead of continually waiting to be invited to the party, you throw the party. You're actually the one who gives the party, and you create belonging for yourself and others. I had to learn that. I didn't know that before. I'm waiting decades for someone to invite me to the party. This is when I was like in my early 40s before I knew this. I was like, oh, I get it now. Okay. But that changed everything. So that was a small thing that I did. But it was an opening to a new way of being, right? These new ways of being that we're going to try on and we're going to live into. And when you really have fidelity to the future that you're committed to creating, it begins to just kind of unfold. And you can graduate from who you know yourself to be. I mean, I was estranged from my own mom for many, many decades, really. I mean, like, we had a very difficult time. But I birthed myself with the true you work, like, what's true about you? I just birthed myself, and suddenly my mother was like looking at me one day. She said, "Who are you? How did you become this person?" Like, she was like, "You're so amazing. How did you do that?" Like, I don't think I had anything to do with that. Like, what happened? Right. So when your mom says that, you're on the right track. Right? So we all have that option. But I just don't think we've known how to do it,
Yeah, that says so much about the power of that pull forward.
Yeah.
That you find new courage you didn't perhaps know you had, a new way of looking at things, because you are really invested in that future goal, that future thing that you believe to be not just right for you, but something that you deserve. So
Yeah.
that says a lot about that setting of that intention and what kind of strength that can call up within a person.
Well, I think it's really critical. I think it's been very missing in our collective conversation around how we're serving our clients truthfully. I mean, people are doing amazing work, mostly around in my process, what would be step 2 and step 3. Step 2, name your source fracture story. Step 3, wake yourself up from the trance of that story. What's really true about you? But without the future pull and the accountability of living in integrity with the future you're committed to creating, it's a loss of power. So there has to be some greater, force at work. And also, I'm a big component on the why. Why does this matter? Because there will come a moment where you have a choice between, the comfort of a cupcake or taking an action that's outside of your comfort zone. Okay. So, and you got to take the action that's outside of your comfort zone in order to really evolve. We can't just understand ourselves into health. It's not just about knowing why you are the way that you are. So I'm like all for graduation, put my cap on, I'll walk down the aisle. I want to be done with that story. I mean, it's so, and you can do it. I mean, my own parents were estranged for over 40 years. They wouldn't talk to each other. They got a divorce really young. It was ugly. It was messy. Thank God, because then I ended up creating conscious uncoupling. So that was my pain into purpose. So that was, a very proud moment for me where the biggest wounding was that horrible divorce. And then I was able to create something beautiful for the world. That was really quite extraordinary for me. But my parents, when you see them together in the same room, they look like buddies. We're all really close. Like, they're married. He's married to someone else. She's a widow, but they're not together romantically, but they're pleasant. They enjoy each other's company. Like, it's almost like if you met my family now, you'd think we were all just really a good, healthy family. And we didn't have that for decades. So it kind of does. It kind of really recalibrates everything. When you are centered and you're in the right identity and you're actually showing up in a way that has integrity to who you really are, that's when everything starts to work and life becomes really much more joyful. So we don't burn out as therapists, I will tell you that. You don't burn out. Because what burns us out is people's feeling so victimized, not being able to just identify with how victimized they feel. That burns us out. It's a drain. It kind of sucks the energy. And it's hard for therapists. I'll speak for myself. It was hard for me to confront people initially because we didn't really know how to confront people without breaking the empathetic attunement.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. I think we've overcompensated in some ways, and we've done our clients no service. I remember, years ago, explaining the impact of someone's narcissistic parent on them, and thinking that was the intervention. It's not the intervention. It's not going to work. You can understand it, but it's not going to change anything. So what does change is to say, okay, so you took on an identity of I'm invisible. And inside of that identity, you've disappeared yourself. You put your first attention on another. And you self-abandon constantly. And so the new way of being, first of all, power statement, it is my destiny to be seen, and it is my responsibility to presence myself. And then you put your first attention on you. And you do that little self-love power practice I just did. What are you feeling? What do you need? So you're aware of yourself. You're self-aware of where you're centered at the level of identity. What are you making this mean about you? And then you assert a boundary with someone of just, and very simple. I'm uncomfortable with that. Can we do something else? You actually speak up. You do the thing that you're scared to do. And then maybe you discover that this person is really self-involved and they don't care about you really, and that's not a relationship to invest more in. Maybe you see that someone is more than willing to accommodate you, and that you're labeling them a narcissist is simply because you've actually trained them in a particular way to be selfish, because you haven't given them a chance to know what you feel or what you need before. So it really is quite radical, the change that can happen from these small choice points that we make. But you have to be informed on what exactly is going to break that open. Yeah.
Well, that was a beautiful exposition, and thank you so much for being willing to share the details with us, to get into that and say, this is really what the process is. This is how it works. This is a critical point. I mean, the points that you're making today, they're really important. And it's hard, without guidance, you can see how people really do get entrenched in that backward looking approach, and also sort of not knowing where to go next. So that was a beautiful exposition of what your work is and what you're hoping to help people do.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Mike, I'm afraid I've monopolized all our time.
No, not I anytime you monopolize, then we're building houses in Boardwalk and Park Place. So I appreciate your monopoly.
I want to know who that man is behind you, Mike.
I'm sorry?
I want to know who that man is behind you.
Oh, it's a first Sir Thomas More. I'm not necessarily it's
Wow.
it was an artist that I bought when he was a teenager, and now he's in New York City with studios and things. So it might be worth something someday.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Well, Katherine, I appreciate your time. Is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't covered before we end this delightful conversation? Or how can people contact you or find out about your future forward therapy endeavors, or sign up for anything that you have going on?
Thank you so much. If you go to my website and purchase the book, you can purchase the book wherever you want to purchase the book, but there is a place where you put down your information and the receipt number and stuff. And then I have bonuses where I've recorded all of the practices in the whole book so that you can work with those practices. And also there's a booklet that you would get on how to do this in a group with friends if somebody just wants to take that on. So just a few things I would love to be able to give as gifts for people. So that's at KatherineWoodwardThomas.com. And just kind of follow the gumdrops there. Just click on that little icon for the book and it'll take you straight there. So thank you for having me today. Lovely to be with both of you.
It's been wonderful to talk to you and to really get into depth that I didn't realize we would today. That was just marvelous. Thank you so much for being so giving and sharing so much with us.
You're so welcome.